Station Omega-7 floated in the darkness of space like a giant metal flower. Its 7 arms stretched out from the central hub where ships from across the galaxy came to dock. Today was special because the newest members of the Galactic Council were arriving for their first big meeting. Captain Jake Miller stood at the observation deck watching the sleek silver ships of the Zephyrian fleet approach. Their vessels looked like works of art compared to the boxy human transports parked nearby. Jake was 35 years old, with gray starting to show in his brown hair. He had been a soldier before becoming a diplomat, but he never forgot the lessons from either job. Lieutenant Lisa Carter joined him at the window. She was 28 and had been working with Jake for 3 years. "They sure know how to make an entrance," she said as the Zephyrian ships moved in perfect formation. Jake nodded. The Zephyrians were impressive. They lived longer than humans and were stronger and faster. Their technology was hundreds of years ahead of anything Earth could make. Most importantly, they controlled 3 star systems full of rare metals that everyone wanted. The docking bay filled with activity as the alien delegation emerged from their ships. The Zephyrians were tall and graceful, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow softly. Their leader was Ambassador Veltar, who had been dealing with galactic politics for over 200 years. Behind him walked a younger Zephyrian who carried himself like he owned the station. "That must be Prince Kelthes," Lisa whispered. She had read all the files on the delegation. The prince was only 19 years old, but he was already known throughout Zephyrian space for his sharp tongue and quick temper. Jake straightened his blue diplomatic uniform. Time to make a good first impression. The welcome ceremony took place in the main assembly hall. Representatives from 12 different species gathered to greet the new council members. The room buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages, while universal translators worked to keep everyone understanding each other. Jake led the human delegation to their assigned seats. Earth had only been part of the Galactic Council for 2 years, and they still got the worst spots in the room. The humans sat near the back, while the older council members took the prime locations, closer to the speaking platform. Prince Kelthes entered the hall with his head held high. His golden robes flowed behind him as he walked to the front row. He looked around the room with the expression of someone judging everything he saw. When his eyes fell on the human section, he paused for a moment before turning away with what looked like disgust. Ambassador Veltar began the formal presentations. Each species stood to offer their welcome and discuss trade opportunities. The Altarians spoke about mineral rights. The Centauri Federation wanted to discuss shipping routes. The Vegan Republic offered cultural exchange programs. When Jake stood to speak for Earth, his voice was calm and steady. "The people of Earth welcome our new friends from Zephyria. We look forward to learning from your experience and sharing what little we can offer in return. Humanity may be young in galactic terms, but we are eager to contribute to the peace and prosperity of all council members." Some delegates nodded politely, others seemed barely interested. Prince Kelthes leaned back in his chair and whispered something to the Zephyrian next to him. Both aliens laughed quietly. The real business began after lunch, when they moved to the smaller conference room to discuss specific trade agreements. The humans had prepared carefully for these talks. Earth needed access to advanced medical technology and better star drive engines. In exchange, they could offer raw materials and agricultural products. Jake spread out his papers on the polished table. Around him sat beings from across the galaxy. Some looked almost human, while others were so alien that just looking at them required effort. But all of them deserved respect, and Jake made sure to treat them accordingly. "Earth would like to propose a medical technology sharing agreement," Jake began. "Our doctors have made some interesting discoveries about genetic therapy that might interest council members. In return, we hope to gain access to Zephyrian healing matrix technology for our hospitals." Prince Kelthes made a sound that might have been laughter. "Genetic therapy from humans? What could primitive apes possibly teach civilized species about medicine?" The room went quiet. Jake felt every eye turned toward him. Lisa shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Ambassador Veltar looked embarrassed by his young companion's words. "Humans have been studying genetics for over a century," Jake replied calmly. We may have different approaches that could be useful. Different approaches? The prince stood up and walked around the table. You mean inferior approaches? Your entire species just learned to travel between stars 50 years ago. My people were building star cities when your ancestors were still living in caves. Other delegates looked uncomfortable. Some stared at their hands while others glanced between Jake and the prince. No one spoke up to defend humanity or criticize the Zephyrian. Royal Prince Kelthes continued his verbal attack. The Galactic Council made a mistake accepting Earth as a member. Humans should be serving as laborers for superior species, not sitting at the same table as their betters. You have nothing to offer except muscle and basic manual work. Jake felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with anger. His military training had taught him to stay calm under pressure, but this was different. This was not just an insult to him, but to every human being in the galaxy. Lisa started to stand up to defend Earth, but Jake held up a hand to stop her. He looked around the table at all the alien faces watching him. Some seemed curious about how he would respond. Others looked sympathetic. A few appeared to agree with the prince. Instead of arguing or making threats, Jake simply closed his folder of papers. He stood up slowly and gathered his materials. His movements were calm and deliberate, like he was finishing a normal meeting. Captain Miller? Lisa asked quietly. Jake picked up his briefcase and walked toward the door. He did not look at Prince Kelthes or any of the other delegates. His face showed no anger or hurt. He simply left the room with the same dignity he had entered with. Lisa followed him into the corridor. Behind them, the conference room remained silent for several long moments before nervous conversations slowly resumed. Sir, what are we doing? Lisa asked as they walked toward the human quarters. Jake kept walking. We are going to show them who we really are. Prince Kelthes felt very pleased with himself as he watched the human diplomat walk away. The way the Earthling had simply gathered his papers and left, without even trying to defend his species, proved everything the prince believed about human weakness. They were cowards who ran away when faced with superior beings. Well, that was easier than I expected, the prince said to the other delegates still sitting around the conference table. I thought humans were supposed to be aggressive, but apparently they are just scared children pretending to be adults. Ambassador Veltar cleared his throat uncomfortably. The older Zephyrian had been watching the exchange with growing concern. He had spent 2 centuries in galactic politics and knew that things were rarely as simple as they appeared. Perhaps we should return to the trade discussions, Veltar suggested. The Altarians were proposing mineral extraction rights in the Vega system. But Prince Kelthes was not ready to move on. He was enjoying the attention too much. Did you see how quickly he surrendered? Humans talk about being warriors, but when challenged they reveal their true nature. They are nothing but weak primitives who got lucky enough to discover star travel. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Centauri representative Dr. Zara Hayes had worked with humans before and found them to be determined partners. The Vegan Republic's ambassador Chun Wu had seen human rescue ships save thousands of lives during the Proxima crisis. Neither of them appreciated the prince's comments, but diplomatic protocol prevented them from speaking against a royal heir. After the meeting ended, Ambassador Veltar walked with his young charge back to their luxury suite on the station. The Zephyrian quarters were decorated with rare crystals and soft fabrics that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. You seem troubled, Mentor, Prince Kelthes said as he poured himself a glass of Altarian wine. Surely you agree that I handled that human problem efficiently. Veltar sat down heavily in his chair. You handled nothing, young prince. You created a problem where none existed before. What problem? The human ran away like a scared animal. He proved that his species has no place among civilized beings. Captain Miller did not run away. He chose not to engage in your provocation. There is a significant difference between those 2 actions. The prince laughed and waved his hand dismissively. You give these primitives too much credit. They are inferior in every way that matters. Weaker bodies, shorter lives, primitive technology. They should be grateful we allow them to exist in our galaxy at all. Veltar had known the prince since he was a small child. The boy was intelligent and capable, but he had grown up surrounded by luxury and praise. No one had ever challenged his assumptions about the universe or forced him to consider other perspectives. "Tell me, Prince, what do you know about human military history?" "I know they fight with crude weapons and die easily. What else matters?" "They have been at war with each other for their entire recorded history, yet somehow they always find ways to survive and rebuild. They have faced extinction multiple times, but they never give up. Does that sound like weakness to you?" Prince Kelthes poured more wine and settled into his chair. "Ancient history means nothing. We are talking about space-age politics, not primitive tribal conflicts. The Proxima crisis happened only 3 years ago. Human ships were the first to respond when the plague broke out. They lost more vessels than any other species trying to evacuate the infected worlds. Captain Miller personally led 7 rescue missions into contaminated areas, so they are reckless and stupid." "That proves my point," Valtar sighed. "They saved over 2 million lives, including the daughter of the Centauri Prime Minister, including 300 Zephyrian scientists who were trapped on Research Station Alpha." For the first time, the prince looked slightly less confident. "I was not told about Zephyrian casualties." "Because your father wanted to spare you the embarrassment of admitting that humans died saving our people while our own fleet was still calculating the risks." The prince stood up and walked to the window overlooking the docking bay. He could see the human ships sitting among the sleek vessels of other species. They looked crude and functional, like tools instead of art, but tools had their own kind of value. "Even if that story is true, it changes nothing," he said finally. "One act of usefulness does not make them our equals. They are still primitive newcomers who should know their place in the galactic order." Over the next few days, Prince Kelthes continued to share his opinions about humanity with anyone who would listen. He told jokes about human intelligence at diplomatic dinners. He suggested that Earth should have observer status instead of full membership in the Council. He proposed that human colonies should be supervised by more advanced species for their own protection. Some younger delegates from warrior species found his attitude amusing. They came from cultures that valued strength above all else and saw humans as weak competitors. But the older ambassadors began to distance themselves from the Zephian prince. Ambassador Chen Wu from the Vegan Republic approached Veltar privately after a cultural exchange event. "Your prince is making enemies unnecessarily. Many of us have found humans to be reliable partners despite their technological limitations." Dr. Zara Hayes from the Centauri Federation expressed similar concerns. "Human medical researchers have shared breakthrough treatments freely with all council members. They ask for nothing in return except the chance to help sick people. That kind of generosity is rare in galactic politics." Even Captain Rex Stone from the militant Rigelian Empire seemed uncomfortable with the prince's constant attacks on humanity. "Warriors recognize other warriors regardless of species. I have fought beside human soldiers and they do not lack courage." Veltar tried to counsel his young charge, but the prince dismissed all criticism as jealousy or political maneuvering. He believed that other species were just trying to gain favor with the Zephyrians by pretending to respect humans. "They are all playing games, Mentor. Everyone knows that strength determines hierarchy in galactic affairs. Humans are weak, therefore they belong at the bottom. Simple logic." The prince did notice that Captain Miller and his delegation had stopped attending optional social events. They still showed up for required meetings, but they kept their interactions brief and professional. The human captain never responded to provocations or even acknowledged the prince's presence unless absolutely necessary. "See how they avoid me now?" Prince Kelthes told his attendants. "They know I exposed their true nature, and they are too ashamed to face superior beings. This proves everything I said about their cowardice." But Ambassador Veltar was beginning to suspect that something else was happening. He had received reports that human ships were making unusual movements throughout the sector. Medical vessels were heading toward refugee camps in contested space. Engineering teams were deploying to struggling colonies. Relief supplies were being distributed to worlds That other species considered too dangerous to approach. Captain Miller was not hiding from embarrassment. He was working. The old ambassador tried one more time to warn his young charge. Prince, I believe you may have misjudged the situation with the humans. Perhaps it would be wise to reconsider your position before events progress further. What? Events? The humans are irrelevant. They have no power to affect anything important. Stop worrying about primitive species and focus on real politics. Veltar realized that the prince would need to learn his lesson the hard way. Some mistakes could only be corrected by experience rather than wisdom. He just hoped the cost would not be too high for everyone involved. Captain Jake Miller stood in the command center of the human transport ship Unity, watching star charts update on the main screen. 3 days had passed since he walked out of the conference room, and he had not wasted a single moment feeling sorry for himself. Instead, he had been planning. Lisa, bring up the refugee camp data from the Kepler sector, he said to his aide who was working at a nearby console. Lieutenant Lisa Carter pulled up the information they had received from Galactic Relief Services. Sir, there are 14 camps in that region housing displaced populations from the border conflicts. Most have been there for over a year waiting for permanent resettlement. Jake studied the numbers. Over 500,000 beings from various species were living in temporary shelters with limited medical care and inadequate food supplies. The major galactic powers had provided some basic aid, but none wanted to get too involved in what they considered a minor regional problem. What about the camp on Sigma 7? Jake asked. Lisa checked her files. That one is in contested space between the Rigel Empire and the Altarian Republic. Both sides claim the system, but neither wants responsibility for the refugees. The relief agencies say it is too dangerous to send regular supply runs. Too dangerous for them, maybe. What do we have available for a humanitarian mission? The medical ship Mercy is finishing repairs at Luna Station. The cargo hauler Hope is loading supplies at Earth. We could have a small fleet ready to move in. 48 hours. Jake nodded. Do it. Send word to Dr. Amanda Ross that we need her best medical team. Tell the supply officers I want food, medicine, and building materials enough for 6 months. Lisa looked concerned. Sir, this mission was not approved by the Galactic Council. We could face political consequences for operating in contested space without permission. Sometimes you have to do what is right instead of what is safe. Earth did not join the galactic community to play politics while people suffer. Over the next week, the human relief mission worked quietly in the Kepler sector. They delivered supplies to camps that had not seen fresh food in months. Human doctors treated diseases that local medical staff could not handle with their limited resources. Engineering teams built better shelters and improved water purification systems. Jake personally visited each camp to assess conditions and coordinate aid efforts. He did not make speeches or hold press conferences. He did not send reports to the Galactic Council demanding recognition for human generosity. He simply worked to help people who needed help. The refugees came from many different species, but they all reacted the same way when the human ships arrived. Hope replaced despair. Sick children started laughing again. Adults began making plans for the future instead of just surviving another day. Why are the humans doing this? Asked Dr. Kavanagh, a Centauri physician who had been working at the camps for 6 months. They gain nothing from helping us. Dr. Amanda Ross was treating a young Altarian girl who had been suffering from malnutrition. We do gain something. We gain the knowledge that we help people who needed help. Sometimes that is enough. Word of the human relief efforts spread quietly through unofficial channels. Other species began to take notice, but Jake made sure his teams avoided publicity. This was not about making Earth look good. This was about doing good work. The real test came when sensors detected an emergency beacon from the Proxima mining station. The automated facility had been extracting rare metals from asteroids for 3 years, but something had gone wrong with the gravitational stabilizers. The entire station was slowly being pulled apart by shifting asteroid positions. The distress signal indicated that 847 beings from various species were trapped inside the station. Normal rescue ships could not get close because of the unstable gravitational fields and floating debris. The asteroid field was like a slowly exploding puzzle that changed every few minutes. Galactic Emergency Services had declared the rescue impossible. The Zephyrian fleet had the most advanced ships in the sector, but their commanders said the risk to expensive vessels was too great. Even the military forces of the Rigel Empire had decided that the situation was hopeless. Jake studied the tactical data from Unity's bridge. The mining station was breaking apart in slow motion, but they still had maybe 12 hours before complete structural failure. 12 hours to save almost 900 lives. Lisa, what ships do we have in range? The construction vessel Builder and 2 mining ships Prospector and Digger. They are not designed for rescue operations, sir. No, but they are designed to work. In dangerous asteroid fields? Sometimes the right tool is more important than the perfect tool. Jake contacted the human ships and explained the situation. Captain Sam Taylor of Builder had 20 years' experience in asteroid construction. Captain Lucy Morgan of Prospector had spent her career navigating dangerous mining operations. Captain Dan Foster of Digger had survived 3 major accidents. In his 15 years of asteroid work, all 3 captains volunteered. Immediately, the rescue operation required careful coordination and creative thinking. The human ships were not fast or elegant, but they were built to take punishment. Their shields could handle impacts that would cripple more sophisticated vessels. Their hulls were designed to survive the kinds of accidents that happen regularly. In dangerous industrial work, Jake led the mission in a modified shuttle that could maneuver through the tightest spaces. He guided the larger ships through the shifting maze of rocks and metal while they used industrial equipment to cut. Into the damaged station, Builder used its construction beams to stabilize sections of the station long enough for evacuations. Prospector employed its mining lasers to clear debris blocking escape routes. Digger utilized its cargo manipulators to pull survivors from collapsed areas. The work was slow and dangerous. Several times gravitational shifts almost crushed rescue. Ships against asteroids. Debris impacts damaged hulls and overloaded shields. But the human crews kept working with the stubborn determination that had carried their species from cave dwellers to star travelers. Captain Taylor managed to extract 312 survivors before Builder's shields failed and forced him to withdraw. Captain Morgan saved 198 beings despite multiple hull breaches that required emergency repairs between runs. Captain Foster pulled the last 337 people from the station. Just minutes before final collapse, Jake made sure that his shuttle was the last vehicle to leave the area. He watched the mining station finally break apart completely and scatter into the asteroid field. If they had arrived just 2 hours later, all those people would have died with it. The rescued beings were taken to the nearest medical station where Galactic Emergency Services finally took over their care. Jake filed a simple report listing the number of people saved and the ships involved. He did not mention the heroic actions of his crews or the impossible odds they had overcome. Dr. Zara Hayes from the Centauri Federation was waiting at the medical station when the human ships arrived. She had traveled there as soon as she heard about the rescue attempt. Captain Miller, the entire galactic community owes you a debt of gratitude. What your people accomplished today was extraordinary. Jake was supervising the transfer of injured survivors to medical facilities. We did our job, Doctor. Nothing more. Your job? Galactic Emergency Services said the rescue was impossible. Every other fleet in the sector refused to even attempt it. And then maybe they were asking the wrong question. Instead of asking if it was possible, they should have asked if it was necessary. Dr. Hayes watched human medical staff working alongside alien doctors to treat the survivors. Why do you do this? Your people could demand payment or political favors for these rescue operations. Instead, you ask for nothing. Jake finished checking on a young Rigelian boy who had been injured during the evacuation. Doctor, if someone is drowning, you do not negotiate terms before throwing them a rope. You throw the rope first and worry about everything else later? Back on Station Omega 7, news of the mining station rescue spread through the diplomatic community. Prince Kelthys heard the reports but dismissed them as exaggerated. Propaganda designed to make humans look important. Ambassador Veltar was not so quick to dismiss anything anymore. He had been watching human activities throughout the sector, and he was beginning to understand that something significant was happening. The humans were not responding to insults with words. They were responding with actions that spoke louder than any speech. The emergency alert reached every ship and station in the Kepler sector at exactly 347 Galactic Standard Time. Captain Jake Miller was reviewing supply reports in his quarters when the urgent message appeared on his personal communicator. All vessels respond immediately. Solar flare event in progress at Kepler 442 system. Colonial world New Haven faces total radiation exposure within 18 hours. Planetary shields failing. Evacuation required for 2.3 million inhabitants. Jake was fully awake and moving toward the bridge before the message finished playing. New Haven was an agricultural world that supplied food to dozens of systems. More importantly, it was home to families from over 20 different species who had built peaceful communities together. Lieutenant Lisa Carter met him in the corridor, already dressed and carrying status reports. "Sir, I have contacted our ships in the sector. Unity, Mercy, Hope, and Builder are all within 6 hours flight time. The other human vessels can reach the system within 12 hours. What about the major fleets? Surely the Zephyrians or Centauri forces are closer than we are." Lisa checked her datapad. The Zephyrian fleet is only 4 hours away, but they have declared the radiation levels too dangerous for their ships. The Centauri Federation has 2 cruisers in range, but they say their passenger capacity is insufficient for a full planetary. Evacuation. Jake reached the bridge and immediately began studying the tactical display. The solar flare was massive even by astronomical standards. Radiation levels near the planet would be lethal to most known species within hours. The colonists had underground shelters, but those were only designed for short-term protection during minor solar events. "Put me through to New Haven Planetary Control," Jake ordered. The main screen flickered and showed a Centauri woman who looked exhausted and worried. "This is Administrator Maria Santos." "Who am I speaking with?" "Captain Jake Miller of Earth Transport." "Command, we are organizing an evacuation fleet for your world." "What is your current status?" Captain Miller thanked the stars. "Our shields are holding at 60% power, but they are dropping steadily. We estimate complete failure in 16 hours. After that, the radiation will penetrate our shelters within 2 hours. Jake did quick calculations in his head. "How many people need evacuation, and where are your main population centers?" "We have 2.3 million colonists spread across 4 major cities and hundreds of smaller settlements. Most of our transport capacity was destroyed when the first wave of radiation overloaded our civilian ships." "Understood, Administrator. Help is coming." Jake cut the transmission and turned to his communications officer. "Send a priority message to all human vessels in this sector. Emergency evacuation mission authorized. All available ships proceed to New Haven immediately." Within minutes, reports started coming in from human captains throughout the region. Medical ships changed course from routine supply runs. Cargo haulers dropped their loads at the nearest stations and headed for the crisis zone. Even small private vessels volunteered to help with the evacuation effort. But Jake knew that human ships alone would not be enough. They needed help from the major galactic powers who had larger fleets and more advanced vessels. He opened a channel to the Zephyrian command ship. "This is Captain Miller requesting immediate assistance with New Haven evacuation. We need every available vessel to save those colonists." The response came from Prince Kelthys himself. The young royal appeared on screen wearing an elaborate ceremonial uniform instead of practical work clothes. "Captain Miller, how amusing to hear from you again. I was beginning to think you had learned to avoid your betters after our last conversation." Jake had no time for games or politics. "Prince, your people have the fastest ships in the sector? Those colonists will die without immediate evacuation support. My ships are far too valuable to risk in such dangerous conditions. The radiation levels would damage our sophisticated systems." Perhaps this crisis will teach these primitive farmers the consequences of settling on unstable worlds. There are children down there, Prince. Families who just want to live in peace. That is unfortunate, but not my responsibility. The Zephyrian fleet cannot risk expensive vessels to save colonists who chose to live in a dangerous location. I suggest you contact someone with more expendable ships. The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at a blank screen. He felt the familiar anger rising in his chest, but forced himself to stay focused on the mission. People were depending on him, and anger would not save their lives. Sir, incoming message from the Centauri Federation, his communications officer reported. Dr. Zara Hayes appeared on screen from the bridge of a sleek Centauri cruiser. Captain Miller, we have 2 ships available, but our total passenger capacity is only about 50,000. It is not nearly enough for a full planetary evacuation. Every person saved matters, Doctor. We will coordinate with your ships to maximize efficiency. Captain, I must warn you that radiation levels near the planet are already at the edge of safety margins for most ship types. By the time we complete evacuation operations, our crews will have received significant exposure. Jake nodded grimly. Understood, Doctor. That is a risk we have to take. The human evacuation fleet reached New Haven just as the planetary shields dropped to 40% power. Jake could see the angry red glow of the solar flare painting the entire system in dangerous light. Radiation alarms were already sounding. On ships that got too close to the planet, the evacuation effort required split-second timing and careful coordination. Human ships were built for industrial work rather than passenger transport, but the crews quickly improvised solutions. Cargo holds were converted to passenger areas. Medical bays were expanded to handle radiation exposure cases. Every available space was prepared to hold frightened colonists. Jake took personal command of a modified shuttle designed for short-range rescue work. His job was to coordinate the evacuation efforts and make sure no one was left behind. The shuttle could handle higher radiation levels than larger ships, which made it perfect for the most dangerous rescue runs. The work was brutal and exhausting. Ship after ship landed on New Haven, loaded desperate colonists, and raced back to safety before radiation exposure became lethal. Human crews worked without breaks, pushing their vessels and themselves to the absolute limit. Captain Sam Taylor brought Builder back for its 5th evacuation run despite dangerous radiation readings. Throughout his ship, Captain Lucy Morgan kept Prospector operating even after her navigation system started failing from radiation damage. Dr. Amanda Ross worked continuously on Mercy, treating colonists who had already received dangerous exposure levels. As the hours passed, the situation became more desperate. The planetary shields finally failed completely, leaving the colonists completely exposed to lethal radiation. Underground shelters provided some protection, but not enough to last much longer. Jake was coordinating the final evacuation runs when his sensors detected movement in orbit around New Haven. A small passenger shuttle was trying to launch from the surface, but its engines were failing. The shuttle carried 37 people, including families with small children. This is Shuttle Beta 7 requesting immediate assistance. Engine power failing, and we cannot reach safe distance from radiation zone. Jake checked his own power levels. His shuttle had been running evacuation missions for 12 hours, and radiation exposure was already affecting his systems. Taking his ship deeper into the radiation field to rescue the failing shuttle would be extremely dangerous. Beta 7, this is Captain Miller. Transmit your exact position and passenger manifest. When the data came through, Jake saw something that made his blood freeze. Among the passengers listed on the failing shuttle was Princess Miralyn of Zephyria. Prince Kelthi's younger sister had been visiting New Haven as part of a cultural exchange program when the crisis began. Jake did not hesitate. He pushed his shuttle's engines to maximum power and dove toward the planet despite radiation readings that were already past safe limits. His ship's systems began failing one by one as the solar radiation overwhelmed their shielding. The rescue took only minutes, but those minutes felt like hours. Jake matched course with the failing shuttle and used his ship's tractor beam to pull it away from the planet. Both vessels raced toward the safety of the outer system while radiation alarms screamed warnings about hull damage and system failures. Jake's shuttle made it to the medical station, but barely. By the time he docked, his ship was running on backup power, and several crew members needed immediate treatment for radiation poisoning. Jake himself had received a dangerous dose, but he refused medical attention until all the rescued passengers were safely transferred to medical care. Princess Marilyn was among those Jake personally helped from the damaged shuttle to the medical facility. She was a young Zephyrian woman about the same age as her brother, but her eyes held wisdom that the prince lacked. "You saved my life, Captain Miller. You risked everything to rescue people you do not even know." Jake was feeling dizzy from radiation exposure, but he managed to smile. "Princes, that is what decent people do for each other. Species and politics do not matter when lives are at stake." As Jake finally accepted medical treatment for his radiation poisoning, he could not help but wonder what Prince Kelthys would say when he learned that a primitive human had. The medical bay on Station Omega 7 was quiet except for the soft hum of healing machines and the gentle beeping of monitoring equipment. Captain Jake Miller lay in a recovery bed while advanced medical technology worked to repair the radiation damage to his cells. His uniform had been replaced with simple medical clothing, and his face was pale, but his eyes remained alert. Prince Kelthys stood in the doorway for several minutes before entering the room. The young Zephyrian royal looked different than he had a week ago. His usual confident expression had been replaced by something that might have been uncertainty or even shame. "Captain Miller, may I speak with you?" Jake turned his head toward the prince and nodded. "Of course, Prince. Please sit down." The prince moved to a chair beside the bed but did not sit immediately. Instead, he stood there looking at the human who had risked everything to save his sister. Jake waited patiently without speaking. He had learned long ago that sometimes the most important conversations began with silence. "The doctors say you will recover completely," the prince finally said as he sat down. "They also say you nearly died pulling my sister's shuttle from the radiation zone." The doctors like to be dramatic. "I was never in any real danger." Prince Kelthys shook his head. "Please do not lie to spare my feelings, Captain. I have read the medical reports. Your radiation exposure was 3 times the safe limit for humans. Your shuttle systems failed completely just minutes after the rescue. If you had arrived even slightly later, both you and my sister would have died." Jake adjusted his position in the bed and looked directly at the prince. "Your sister is safe. That is all that matters. Why did you do it?" "After everything I said." "About your species, why did you risk your life to save a Zephyrian royal?" "Because she needed help and I was in a position to provide it. Her species and family connections had nothing to do with my decision." The prince was quiet for a long moment. He stared at his hands, which were folded in his lap. When he spoke, again his voice was much softer than before. "I owe you an apology, Captain. Actually, I owe your entire species an apology. I have been wrong about humans in every possible way." Jake did not respond immediately. He had been insulted by the prince, but he had also seen how young and inexperienced the royal was. Everyone deserved a chance to learn from their mistakes. "We all make errors in judgment, Prince. The important thing is learning from them. I said terrible things about humans. I called you primitive and weak. I suggested that your people should serve as laborers for a superior species. I was completely wrong, and I am ashamed of my behavior. You were expressing opinions based on limited information. Now you have more information, and your opinions can change accordingly." Prince Kelthys looked up at Jake with something like wonder. "How can you be so calm about this?" "I insulted you.